move.
There's nothing sadder than going to your community, seeing the young people that, we all have hopes and dreams for. And that's what happens in a community setting, right? We see young people from the time that they're, small, and we see them grow up and we see how bright they are. We see all their different characters and we think, wow, there must be a future there somewhere. And then you come back to that community a few years later and you find that those same brilliant young people who are now addicted to drugs. And drugs can really ruin the trajectory of someone's life. And you look at them and the first thing you think is like, why can't you just fix this? Why can't you just leave the drugs, go to rehab and, go back on your life? Because, nothing, it's never too late. You can always sort of fix your life and get back on, a better path. But it's actually not that easy at all. I mean, especially as crystal meth, what we call nyaope, alcohol and polysubstance abuse has spiraled out of control all across the continent. And I'll speak in the context of South Africa. Literally almost every street corner you go to, you might find someone there who has a drug addiction. But developed over a decade ago, there's a model that rejects the outdated 30-day fix and offers a long-term, trauma-informed and holistic rehabilitation and reintegration approach that's showing measurable and real-world results. We're going to be speaking a little bit about this particular model. We're chatting to Curt Heerden, founder and CEO of the Center of Transformation, about this particular drug rehabilitation model. Thank you so much for your time, Curt. And I'm sure there is so much work that a center like yourself needs to do as we see the continuation of a surge of drug abuse all across the country.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. Just hearing your introduction and you speaking about what's happening within our communities and the once child who wasn't addicted, where we would see dreams, hopes, and aspirations. And years down the line, when you meet that same young person, it's not the case. Hearing you and hearing how you've introduced me on the show definitely makes us conclude that we are dealing with a mammoth task in front of us. And that task cannot be tackled within 30 days.
Absolutely. And speaking about the task being tackled within 30 days or the task being tackled all, our first thought process when we see, drug addicts who are really everywhere these days, everywhere you go in South Africa, you find someone with the assumption that, they're doing drugs. And then the first thing you think about is, you can actually fix this. Why don't you go to rehab? So why isn't it that simple?
Because rehab does not change individuals. It's the program that's facilitated within the rehab that changes individuals. That's what we must understand. Many times we think that rehab is the answer. Rehab is not the answer. It's what happens within the rehab that helps us get the answers to the questions that we are looking for.
Yeah, well, let's speak about going into rehab because obviously it takes a very intentional decision for someone who has an addiction to fix it and go to rehab. But so many times those who do go to rehab come back and they relapse over and over again. In fact, we're seeing it as a public spectacle in some moments. There is a famous drug user that we see on social media here in South Africa. He goes by the name of Alostro. And just a couple of years ago, there's a man who has a rehabilitation center who took him in and he had spent years on rehabilitation and were there cheering on social media. Oh my goodness, he looks so much better. He looks good. He looks coherent. And now, literally a few weeks ago, we go back on social media and this individual called Alostro is back on the streets. Once again, back to drugs, even after years of being in rehab.
The question that we must ask is not how long he was in the rehab. It's what program was facilitated with him during his process of rehabilitation. And also, if he done more than just gone through the program, did he actually go through the program? Many times we try and keep individuals away from addiction in a rehab for X amount of years. And we believe that it's the years that changes them. But it's not the years that changes them. It's the transformation that happens within them that changes them. Most people don't understand that you don't change an addict by trying to modify the behavior. You change an addict by transforming their inner system And the inner system really deals with their nervous system. How does their nervous system work? What have they gone through as a child? What's that intergenerational trauma that has been passed down to them? And unless we deal with the inner nervous system and understand how that works, all we are literally doing is putting a comma on the addict's addiction and not a full stop.
Wow. Well, that's really new information to most of us when we think about it, because usually when you think about things like the nervous system, we think about maybe programs, first of all, that would cost quite a lot, but really that don't exist in many of our societies. So, really quickly before we go on a break, I do want to start unpacking what the Center of Transformation has launched and the new rehabilitation pioneering model that you guys have implemented. But let's speak about what a normal rehabilitation center or environment actually looks like and how they usually try to treat addiction.
So we have the famous 30-day model, and the reason why that's not successful is because we're sitting with a 60 to 70% relapse rate in South Africa as a result of that 30 day model, and it takes about 3 months to 9 months for the brain to develop a new neural pathway. So anything less than 3 months is literally setting up the addict for disappointment, but also identifying what is that new neural pathway that's being created for the addicted addict, or are they just being isolated in reference to you have to stay sober for so many years because that will be the measuring stick we'll use for your status of sobriety within the community. And that often ends up in disappointment. So, what we have developed is a model that is 6 to 9 months, and in that 6 to 9 months we deal with various type of topics that literally deals with the intergenerational trauma that the individual has gone through, and understanding if it does not stop with that individual, that intergenerational trauma will be passed on to the next generation.
Wow. Well, let's find out a little bit more about this new model, Kurt, after the break. Stay with us on the line. We're speaking to the founder and CEO of the Center of Transformation about a new rehabilitation model that they've started implementing. Curt Heerden will keep joining us and tell us more about this after the break.
Palesa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
Well, Curt Heerden joins us today, founder and CEO of the Center of Transformation, and we're speaking about the rejection of an outdated 30-day fix rehabilitation model. And Curt says they've come up with a more durable long-term solution. Let's talk a little bit about that long-term solution that you are talking about. How did you design it? What kind of investigation did you make to actually make sure that you're also not going into the same trajectory as this 30-day fix that you are not for?
So, what we've done over the last decade is obviously we've helped individuals from various different walks of life, individuals that has been addicted to various different types of substances. And engaging with these individuals as a team over the years, we've identified why they have gone through their relapse cycles over the years. And we have literally allowed their experience to become the reference we've used to draft up a program that not only deals with the addiction, but also with the person. Because a program needs to be twofold. You're dealing with the person who is an addict, but then you also deal with the person who had an experience. And that experience often is not what rehabs deal with, because the experience as it relates to the person is different for each person, even though they might be booking in for the same substance abuse. So that's why in our program, within, for example, in our first month, we have what we call a relationship building process. In that relationship building process, we identify why this person is here more than just being here for their addiction. And then for the remainder of the stay, we understand that we need to draft up a program that is tailor made for their need, not just for the reason that they find themselves being here in our facility as it relates to their addiction. It is imperative that we identify what do we need to do for this person who is broken more than this person who is addicted.
Okay, tell us a little bit about how do you do that practically?
So basically, what we do is we take them through a month one. Month one, we have a specific theme. Like I said, now it will be relationship building process, and then with that, we have subsidiary topics as it relates to the theme for that month every single week. That is what we do every single month for 6 to 9 months. So there is a generic program that we take everybody through that deals with their addiction, be it Nyaupe, be it Mandrax, be it crystal meth, whatever the drug is. But then there's one that we tailor make for the individual that runs parallel with that program for 6 to 9 months that deals with the specific need of that person. For example, if that person books in and his wife is on the verge of divorcing him because of his drug addiction, how we deal with him is very different to how we would deal with someone who books in and who is not married, who doesn't have children, who is himself still a child. That individualistic program there is different as it relates to the same program they will be booked into practically to help them with their addiction.
Okay, you spoke a little bit about the personal narrative of the addict. Why is it so important?
It's extremely important because the problem did not create the addiction. Addiction created the problem. And beneath every person is a problem that they first encountered. And they did not know how to solve the problem. That's why they ran to addiction. So the personal narrative helps us identify what the problem is that this person tried to resolve by choosing addiction as the outlet. So trying to deal with addiction independent of the personal discovery of who that person is, we are going to by default just allow that person to stay sober but still leave them broken as a person.
Yeah. And people have various stories, and people have various histories. And each one, I'm sure, is hard to dissect and to, dissect and dismantle and put together into pieces. Feels like a lot of work. How do you do it in a way whereby it's not overweighing the work that you're doing as an organization? It doesn't become too cumbersome, honors your practitioners as well.
I love the fact that you're saying it sounds like a lot of work, and I think the reason why most are not doing it is simply because you cannot, it's impossible to deal with long-term problems on a short-term solution. So yes, it is work, it's tedious, but it has to be done. And what we have done over the years now is develop a team that currently also are being upskilled by professionals in the field of trauma and somatics. Because we've understood that unless we upskill our team constantly on a regular basis, we will find ourselves being antiquated in our model as it relates to the growing need and demand of addiction within the life of the individuals that books into our program. So yes, it's a lot of work, but because of the systematic approach that we take, we understand what needs to be done today, what needs to be done in a week, and what needs to be accomplished in a month. So literally, we take this mammoth task, we break it down into smaller chunks, and we take it step by step.
Does it always work, or have you had instances where there's failures and you had to revisit the structure of the program itself to see where there are pitfalls?
Most definitely, yes, because there are some individuals that books into the program that has no desire to find inner healing. All they want to find is the reconciliation of relationships that's been broken because of their addiction. So they don't book in to find inner healing. They just book into the program to find recovery. So the problem that became the reason why they used in the first place is not what was resolved in the program.
Mm-hmm.
So they booked in, and all they wanted to find was recovery. So they manipulate their way through the process because they want a job back, they want a wife back, they want relationships that was broken back because of addiction. So when they get that back, they reintegrate it back with the same problem that's not resolved. Therefore, and that relationships again does not work out the way they thought it would. The problem is still there. Therefore, they reinvent their past and they book back into the facility. We have seen that.
Mm. And what do you do when that happens?
We take them through the same process
Okay.
because you cannot dictate how someone must change. You cannot dictate how honest someone must be. And
Mm-hmm.
unless the person books in from a reference point of honesty and desperation, then true change happens. But if they're going to book in on the premise of manipulation, trying to use the rehab um, not as a womb to rebirth themselves, but as a waiting room to restore relationships through manipulation, they will bear the consequences of that within and of themselves. So the structure stays the same, the love we give them stays the same. The onus is on the person to come to the conclusion, I need to want this, and I need to want it bad enough to change within myself and not to change to restore relationships so I can manipulate my way back into it again.
Well, we have to leave it there. It's fascinating. And I think that is very interesting because patience is something that we don't give addicts. We want that transformation in their lives because we're desperate for them to change. But we know that it also make our lives better the sooner they change. Where can we go to find out more about the Center of Transformation?
So you can visit our website on www.cotsa.co.za, or you can also visit us on any one of our social media handles, Center of Transformation. On those social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you'll find out more about what it is that we do on a daily basis. But as I said, alternatively, you can also visit our website. That's www.cotsa.co.za.
Thank you so much, Curt, and keep doing the good work.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
That's Curt Heerden, founder and CEO of the Center of Transformation. Speaking about a model that really outpaces the 30-day fixed model, and it seems to aim to be more comprehensive than a time fixed method. What's your take on that one? +2763 406 9126. That's where you can WhatsApp us. Well, let's move on to our sports update. I've been following Wimbledon. Some of the biggest top 10s are out. Coco Gauff is out of Wimbledon. Medvedev is out. Zverev is out of Wimbledon. It is such a wonderful, unexpected turn. Let's find out more what's happening in other sports news.